Nada Saab is Associate Professor of Arabic Literature at the Lebanese American University. She's the Director of our Arabic Language and Culture Program. With Robert Myers, she is the author of several studies on modern Arabic drama, and they've translated many works written by modern Arab dramatists. I won't go into all those names. But of special note, Nada translated Shakespeare's King Lear to the Lebanese vernacular with Sahar Asaf and Rafi Fageli, and that played in Beirut theaters in 2016. She's the author of books and articles on medieval Sufi mystical literature and critical editor of medieval Sufi manuscripts. Robert Myers is a professor of English, director of the Alwaleed Center for American Studies, and director of the Theater Initiative at the American University of Beirut, our sister university in Beirut. He is a cultural historian and writer and the author of over 15 plays and numerous articles on theater and culture. Together, Nada and Robert have collaborated on many significant translations over the years. Before we begin, I have a quick question. How many are here for the first time? Good, welcome. I hope it's not your last time. All right, Nada and Robert, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate that you are here for this event, and I hope it is a beneficial event for everyone. Before we begin, if I may...
Speak into the mic.
Oh, speak.
If you don't speak into the mic, we're not going to hear you.
Okay, is that okay now?
Especially the people hiding in the back.
Is that okay? Okay, very good. Before I begin, there are a few people that I would like to thank. I would like to thank Nadim Shhadi, the director of the center here, and I would like to thank also all personnel here at LAU who helped us in setting up this event. At LAU also, one very important supporter of our work has been the Vice President of LAU for Student Services, Lisa Salem. The departments at LAU and at AUB were both very supportive of our work, both the English department, the humanities department, and the deans of both universities. Some of our work was also published in previous works, and we've had the pleasure of working with the Graduate Center. I thank Gordon, Marvet Carlson, and also Frank Kenstrad, that you've always been very helpful to us. Two of the people who we edited their works, Gordon Whitty, Ismail Khalidi, and also the actors who are here with us, Layla Bak, Samir Kanaan, Noor Hamdi, and Rawiya Al-Shab. I don't know if I've missed anyone. Robert, do you want to acknowledge?
Well, I'm not sure that they're here, but certainly we could go on and on, but we won't make it about thank, it'll sound like the Oscar speech, yes. But I would like to thank Fadlu Houri, who's the president of AB, who started the theater initiative, gave us some funding, put theater right at the center of life at the American University of Beirut. Nadia Sheikh, who's the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Sahar Asaf, who's my collaborator, who directed a number of the first productions of these plays in Beirut and also here in New York. And of course, the people at the two publishers, the two editors that published these books, Teddy Dahls at Brill, and John Donatic and Danielle Dorlando at Yale University. So that's it.
Okay,
I want to thank my mother,
sorry for this long introduction.
Kindergarten teacher.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll start a little bit about talking about the history of our work together, Robert and I. We've been friends for over 12 years, and this project started actually 12 years ago. It began as a simple gesture at the time, 12 years ago. A very good Iraqi playwright by the name of Jawad al-Asadi had was receiving Prince Claus Award at the time, and he had written a play that documents American invasion of Iraq. It was Hammam Baghdadi or Baghdadi Bath, and it was showing at that time. Now, Robert, at the time, we were very good friends at the time, and he said, you know, there is this playwright, and maybe we should translate his plays. Let's do that. Now, of course, my degree is in literature and in Sufism. Basically, I do medieval literature. I hadn't done anything on drama. So it was basically one of the things that we do as friends. That's how we started. So we translated Hammam Baghdadi or Baghdadi Bath, and then it came here to the United States. Robert brought it, and it played in Vassar, it played in Dartmouth, and it's a very beautiful play. It documents a very important point in history at that time. However, we felt that we needed to continue with this project, and at the time we felt, well, we need to go to another play that is a little bit more complex, and as such, we translated a play that was written in 1966, played after 1967, and it was talking about Lebanon, upheavals, revolutions, dictatorships by Issam Mahfouz. It is a very complex play, and I will talk about it a little bit. It's very complex because it was very politically telling. It played after 1967, the 1967 war, and Issam Mahfouz felt that it was a time to write a play that speaks about the upheavals of the moment, which the 1967 war was actually a pivotal moment, and it was also a representation of the kind of unstable political situation that was going there. The important thing about The Dictator, and that was a very important exercise for us, was The Dictator is a very complex play in terms of language. It was an experimentation in language. And so Issam Mahfouz came up, he said, these are new times that require a new language. So he invented a language which he called Al-Fusha Shabiya, or popular Fusha, popular standard Arabic, which is not the language that we write, it's not literary language, and it's also a language that mimics the way that we speak. However, he is also a poet, and much of his play was a play of words, puns, making up situations and actions based on language. So language was a very important part of performance, and that was a big challenge for us because much of the words were actually plays on words, and we had to find equivalents for in English. And so it was a good exercise for us because we kind of knew, from which component we were actually coming from. In my case, from Arabic literature and language studies, and it's very difficult to try and find a register in English for that. And then we went into more difficult projects. Then came Rituals of Signs of Transformations, which is actually included in Wannous's book. Then we did The Rape by Wannous. And then, as our projects came about, we were asked actually by some editors of Brill that maybe it would be good if we wrote a book about, submit a proposal for a book, and that's what we did. We thought of what we had done, and of course, we are both inclined to read political theater. Much of what we had done was on political theater, and so the idea came, why not write a book about modern and contemporary political theater of the Levant, where we include the translations of the plays that we have, and it also includes studies of the plays that we work on. And so this is what this book came about. It is the fruit of 12 years of work, that we had done together. To tell you the truth, the contribution of this book is twofold, I think. On the one hand, it is the nature of the translations that we did. Both Robert and I believe that theater, as it moves to a new culture, needs to live in a new culture. And so the translation needs to take into account that it should sound as if that translation comes from the culture in which it is received. okay? And since many of the works that we did are highly literary and very complex, they are very complex linguistically speaking. And so when you translate, you need to de-anthropologize, okay, and make the text sound as natural as possible in the receiving language. Now that was always a very big challenge, and many times we used to have lots of discussions about very critical moments where, let's say, when a text moves into language, it gets diluted a lot and it loses much of its components. And I remember Rituals, I think, was one of those texts which really, caused a lot of, because it is basically, entrenched in Sufi technical language, which is not necessarily readily translatable. So we had to come up with many gimmicks for that. Actually, I can show you some of one example of what we did in terms of translation, how our translation differs from other translations. The other thing, which is probably a different component in this book than what you would find in collections of translated works, is that we have a balance between studies on Arabic modern drama and translations as well. So every single play that is included in this play in this book has an introduction on the significance of the author, a significance of the play itself, and the literary and critical analysis of what the play is. Also, we tried to see we tried to capture in this book historical moments, okay, that are in progression from 1967 up until the present moment. As you probably know, 1967 was the war that was between Israel and the Palestinians, and after 1967, ideological consciousness, political consciousness was very heavily transformed into literary action. Now, The Dictator, which we worked on, Robert and I, it was written in 1966. However, it is very relevant to 1967 afterwards, because it was talking about the political situation that led to 1967. This is the first play in this book, and then it is followed by another play that was written in 1968 by Muhammad al-Maghut. He wrote The Jester, Almohad Rage, which questions notions of nationalism, which also deals with dictatorships, and it also uses a lot of Shakespearean plays. You have actually the character of Othello already included in that play as well. Then it was followed by The Rape, Al-Ightisab, which was written by Sa'dallah Wannous. Actually, Sa'dallah Wannous was also a very politically activist. However, psychologically speaking, and after Sadat's visit to the Knesset in Israel, he went totally silent, and he felt that this was the ultimate point of defeat, the ultimate moment of defeat. He tried to commit suicide, and he went silent for 10 years. He did not write anything. After that, after the Oslo Accords, actually, he began to experiment with writing again. And he came about a play by Vallejo, which is The Double Life of Valmy, and which talks about dictatorships and how torture is used, okay, in interrogation practices. So he adapted it, but created two families, an Israeli family and the Palestinian family, and how torture practices by Israeli personnel were actually affecting their psychology, and the sort of dynamics of the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians, which was in the aftermath of the Oslo Accord, as I said. After that, then we have also included the work of Hammam Baghdadi by Jawad al-Asadi, which also has a documentation of the invasion of the United States of Iraq. And finally, we have a final text, which is by Raida Taha. Raida Taha is a Palestinian writer. She speaks about her experiences in the manner of hakawati, which is storyteller. And she goes back and she describes her experiences and her memories of her deceased father, who was actually a resistance fighter, who was killed by Barak Mahek and the brother of current minister Netanyahu. So the whole story is about the memories of the families of those who were also entrenched in this political turmoil. Now, what we also have tried to do in this book was to place it within world theater that is also politically oriented, rather than consider it only as an embodiment of modern Arabic theater, but actually to place it within the whole atmosphere of what was being done in terms of politically engaged theater at the time. I would say, I don't know, I mean, this is a general description of what the book is about. I think what you will see here is examples of some. I will show an example of my translation. I don't know if that can be shown. Right, that Word document.
It's there.
You got it there? Okay, maybe I can talk about it here. This was actually two of the plays that are included in our volume. Almohad Rage, The Jester, was initially translated by Gordon Whitty, and Gordon was very generous in providing us with his translation, and he agreed that we edit it and to put it in the play, in the volume here. What you see on this side is actually Gordon's translation. Our edition is on the other side. I put it here because much of the witticisms that are in The Jester are actually language-based, okay? I will read The Jester. This is what Almohad Rage says. Because of her, I cannot sleep by day or night, as if there were pepper and spices in my heart. كأن في قلبي فلفل وبهار. Okay? So, but in our case, this doesn't make, I mean, if you put it on stage for an American or a Western audience, okay, this will not work. So, because of her, I can't sleep day or night. It's as if my heart was on fire with hot spices. Now then, filfilin, filfilon, pepper, filfil is a noun. It should be in the accusative case, not the nominative. You see on top we have, it's as if my heart was on fire. It should be where, not was. So we actually flipped the game, so that there is a mistaken grammar in English. And it's also something that would, actually people would speak, people would say, okay, in English. The same you would see at the end, okay, of this part. He says, طالما الموضوع معلقا بيننا, which is grammatically correct. Now, we of course write, as long as the matter between us will remain resolved. So our game was on will, okay, rather on the mistake which was there. Okay, wrong, طالما. Okay, the particle طالما, as long as takes a noun in the nominative case, not the accusative. Okay, again, this does not work in English, so wrong, remains, and so on and so forth. So we took out everything that had to do with the peculiarities of the Arabic language, which actually do not translate to English. And what we try to do is actually to make our translations work in English. And we've had several cases. For example, one of our plays here, The Dictator, as I said, it is heavily, the whole text is a play on words. There is this one little section where there is a dialogue between these two characters, and it's called the game of names, and they make up names. But in Arabic, these names are actually, they are all derivations of root systems. They sound in a certain way. Okay, if anyone knows Arabic, they are sound on a certain maf'ul form, fa'lan. Many of them are made up words, but you know that they are made up because they have political significance, because they have historical significance. It's a very complex play. very complex part. Now, what we did actually when we finished translating that play, we stayed for 6 months, just stuck at a very short paragraph, okay, of names, of like 7 or 8 names. Each person would say a name and then the other person. It stayed 6 months. We would meet continuously. I would explain to him, what is going on, how the words are derived, what exactly historically they refer to, why he is making up. We would meet for hours, okay, come up with nothing, and then we would meet again until finally Robert came to me one day and he said, I dreamt about it at night, okay, I have the solution. And so what we did was actually, what he did was the words which are in English, in Arabic, the meanings, we have the same meaning in English. However, we added what sounds like a Latin component. Okay, so the words sound like they are Latin names, but they are not actually Latin names. They are medieval. They belong to ancient history, because also Fusha belongs to ancient history, and they also have these strange combinations of how you derive things. So the game actually worked, okay, beautifully. However, up until this moment, and maybe you will see it if you read this book and you see in the beginning, the brother of Isam Mahfouz hates our play on, this thing, and so refuses that this play, specific play, actually be acted as it is, because he says philosophically he does not agree with our interpretation, and no matter how much, we try to convince him of its validity, that it's a critical, analysis that needs to live in the other language, we could not convince him, and as such, it's the only play that is not allowed to perform, because he does not approve of that. He wants that it needs to be literal and translated in this manner, which we felt, it was an inappropriate thing to do. So I don't know if I should say anything more. I think in a nutshell, this is what this book is about. I will leave the rest for Robert, and then, as we said, there will be some performances, and there will be some footage of some of the plays that were produced, because much of what we have here were actually produced at various times throughout these past years. Thank you.
Great. Now you told them that the translation came to me in a dream. As I was sleeping. Hey, where did this came to me in a dream? Well, actually, you said we'd sit there for hours. Actually, what would happen is I would come up with an idea and not do it. No, it's not good. And a lot of it, interestingly, would have to do with the fact that it would not function in English, or there would be an association that you would make, like sleepy, I went 7 dwarves. Everybody's gonna, as soon as they hear these names or whatever, they won't be able to get it out of their head, so it won't be this pun. So then we came up with this idea of pacificus, somnolentos, whatever, and the play is very much about the different registers in Arabic. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this, but until very recently, plays were written in and performed in Fusha, in modern standard Arabic, a very high register. And Sam Mahfouz said that this created an unintentional alienation effect, referring first to Brecht. And when I remember when I first moved to Beirut, and would point this out, this very odd sort of circumstance of going to the theater and the play is in a language which is radically different from what people speak. Even if it's a rather banal situation, people had kind of internalized this diglossic contradiction. It was not, sort of, oh, that's the way it's done. And what's going on now, and this is something that we've discovered and have seen, is that in this trajectory of political plays from the 1960s through the present, one of the most profound changes, transformations, has been in the language itself. Now, young people in the theater overwhelmingly are using Ammiya. They're using vernacular. In the previous generation, Wannous' generation, for example, it's really associated with Arab nationalism, we're one people. So if we do a play in Levantine vernacular, it's not going to be accessible to the Moroccans or the Algerians or whatever, and we're one people. But what's going on now, Lena Apiad, our friend who is a director at LAU, was saying that she's invited to judge at a festival, say in Algeria now, and she will go and literally have to have translations. It will be in different Arabics. So it's not terribly dissimilar from the relationship among, say, Romance languages, you know, Portuguese and Romanian, or Italian and Spanish, or whatever. But the theater is the place, it seems to be, where this is being played out. This question of language, and language is one of the subjects of political theater. And it's come up in a lot of interesting ways for us. I would say that it's only recently that I've come to realize that my relationship with Arabic comes through Spanish and Portuguese. And it's something that in the Levant, people, you know, they're very busy looking at France, very busy looking at the US, and or will look at the language in terms of English. As soon as I realized that there are 5,000 cognates in Portuguese and 3,000 in Spanish, I realized, oh, I already have a vocabulary in Arabic. And if you look at the syntactical structures in those languages, very frequently you'll see that what you might do with a text by say Garcia Marquez or, you know, Lope de Vega, what is not terribly different from what you would do when you were playing with the syntax and word order from Arabic to English. And what that allowed for me then, as we were working together, since again, I'm way out there in like language number 4, is to actually see our process of translation as de-essentializing and not to use the term de-anthropologize. I had seen something akin to this in Latin America in the 70s and 80s, in that, you know, people say, well, you know, you lose things in translation. It's lost in translation. But then there comes to be a recognition of gaining in translation. And I remember discovering that Garcia Marquez, for example, of course, the most important writer, he was really straightforward, was William Faulkner, but he read William Faulkner in Spanish. And I remember then reading Garcia Marquez in the 80s myself and go, wow, this is such new, interesting writing. And then, you know, it's, and I'm from the American South, if you can't tell from my accent. And so it's as if your neighbor went off to Morocco, came back or whatever, you don't recognize them when they come back. And you go, you know, and that's the way languages function. And I think for whatever reason, a number of reasons, one is, of course, that Arabic is a liturgical language. It's the language of God. There is this idea afoot that the Quran is untranslatable. And so, and people with very good reason are extraordinarily proud of Arabic, which is a very beautiful language. Is that we would encounter this all the time, and people would say, you know, we put on a couple of plays, Sahara soft-directed plays that we had written, and people would say afterwards, they would go, you know, it's very beautiful, but mish nafsi bil Arabi. It's not the same in Arabic. I would be, oh really? You know, Dostoevsky, on the other hand, when you translate him to Spanish, it's amazing. It's exactly the same. You know, it's like, what's it about? That's what happens. And one time I remember we translated Saab, The Rape by Wannous, and we had to adapt the play to make it work on stage, and inevitably there were lines that were cut, substantial lines that were cut and or rearranged, and we knew the Wannous family, they didn't have a problem with it. But what it meant was, when it came time to put up the titles and project them, then we had to translate our new version back into Arabic. Well, at this point, you know, people went and saw the play and they went, you know, thank you for doing it, because it's a very heavy, important play about the use of rape as a tool of interrogation by the Shin Bet during the first Intifada. As Nata was talking about, it's very much an adaptation of a play by Antonio Buero Vallejo, the Spanish playwright, coming from the Franco era. So it's transposed to the first Intifada. And they went, thank you for doing the play. It was very heavy, it's very intense, but we're so happy you did it. You know, Mishnaf Sishi Belarabi. You know, like, yes, okay. The Arabic was so much more beautiful. You know, and I would say, well, it may have been, but that's not what he wrote. You know, we translated back into Arabic from, you know, the translation, so it was translated, you know, into English, and then our English translation back into the title. So this is all to say that for us, the gold standard is for all of these writers to live in the language. We all know Chekhov was originally written in Russian, and there are multiple translations of Chekhov. You know, we all know this. The same with Ibsen or Lorca. You know, we know this, and it's not a stumbling block. And it is true that if you have a Chekhov play, very frequently there'll be a glossary in the back, you know, of what a kvass is or how much this length of whatever. But there's no necessity to have these interpolations in the play itself. You're dropped into this world, and the measurements are the measurements, right? The eating utensils are the eating utensils in this world, right? So I think once we had this as our starting point, and we're very, very fortunate because from the beginning, our plays were getting produced. And so we always thought of them as living works. And this is very much comes from being a playwright, I think. I understood that nobody writes a play to put it in a drawer. I mean, it is true that Wannous, others do write and have written philosophical plays, sort of Sartrean plays that are kind of, you know, essays, or you have a kind of anti-theater, you know, Maeterlinck and others who write closet dramas or whatever. But by and large, people write plays to be produced. It's like a blueprint of a house by an architect, and you don't want it, you know, oh, it's a beautiful blueprint. It's, you know, to build a house, right? And so we're very fortunate that we saw these plays, and we saw them in various iterations. We saw them with different casts. We saw them frequently in Arabic and in English. We saw them in different venues, etc. And I think what works really works, and what doesn't work, it's very humbling. what doesn't work, yeah, which is what a playwright goes through. You know, when you have a reading, and you know, it's a chemical reaction. You know, if there's a joke and people miss it, you know, that was the funny part. You can find out very quickly, you know, whether it works or not. And so that was really a gift for us. The way that this book came into being is an interesting story. First, I should tell you very briefly who Wannous is, for any of you who don't know. He was born in 1942 in Tartus, which is very near Tartus, which is where the Russian naval base is. People kind of forget this part of the Syrian civil war, or whatever, or the fact that Syria is in the Eastern Bloc is one way to think of Syria. He was in Cairo. He worked as a cultural journalist. He studied there. He was a cultural journalist in Paris. He met many of the major figures in the French theater. He eventually interviewed Jean Genet, for example, Brill. A number of those figures were his mentors. He was there in '68 during the protests at the Sorbonne studying, and his first major play very much comes out of that experience combined with the 1967 war. That is the first play in this book. We translated it as an evening's entertainment for the 5th of June. Literally, it's Hufflet Summer, which people translate literally as evening party. However, party, you know, and it was great. Roger Allen, who's a really important translator, made this point too. It's very much has the feel, it's deeply sardonic. It has the feel of a kind of a vaudeville, right? You know, it's like an evening's entertainment for a disaster, right? A catastrophe is basically it. The next play, Mamluk Jaber, is, in my opinion, maybe his greatest play. It very much uses this figure of the Hakawati, the storyteller. It takes place in a cafe, and it tells the story of the sack of Baghdad in 1258 by Hulagu Khan. And it's, as frequently is the case with the Wannous, very meta-theatrical, stories within stories. So it's both meta-theatrical in the Western sense, and in the Eastern sense can be seen to be participating in the framed tale tradition. The next play that's in the volume is Rituals of Signs and Transformation, and it's very explicitly framed tale. In fact, at the end, the heroine dies when her brother kills her in an honor killing. And she tells her brother, you can't kill me, I'm a story. I go on. I keep generating stories. And there are explicit references to 1001 Nights, but it's not simply this idea of stories and proliferation of stories. It's about structure. And as I said, in the same way that we determined that language is a very important aspect of the political in these political plays, also the form of the play, how the plays are told. And one reason that Wannous's plays, I think, continue to resonate, I think they're really important. I mean, we compared him at different points to Václav Havel, Fugard, Shoyinka, Boal. People simply don't know him. He's of that generation because he's a playwright from Syria. And then the final play, Wretched Dreams, is actually, I think, a rewriting of an earlier, he started the play in the 60s. It's a very kind of dark play in which in this kind of hotel cafe, a boarder appears, and these two women, one whose husband has given her venereal disease, decides this is her son who she lost, who's come back now at 20 years old, and the other one decides this is her lover. And it's very difficult to sort of figure out which parts are kind of the real part as opposed to the dreams, but it's also a very disturbing allegory of informers of this kind of world of unreality that is kind of the quintessence of the Ba'ath Party Syria in the 1960s. So that's a little bit about what the volume is. In terms of how it came into being, what I will say is that Marilyn Hacker, who's a very well-known American poet, came to us and suggested that we translate On Memory and Dying, which is a memoir Wannous wrote as he was dying of cancer in 1996. He died in 97. And we decided it was more important that people know what he's principally known for. So we suggested a reader that would include plays, and also his theoretical work. And so essays, interviews, his most famous speech. And what that's led us to is, for example, we did a talk last year about Brecht and Wannous, and in the AUB library, where Wannous's personal library was donated by his family as a result of some of these productions, there is a giant folder from the 1968 gathering in East Berlin on the 70th, the occasion of the 70th birthday of Brecht. that Peter Weiss invited Wannous to go to. And it has all of the programs from the Berliner Ensemble. So it's not a tenuous or theoretical connection. It's a very tight connection, and you begin to then circle back to what I talked about at the beginning, is that Syria is, among other things, the Eastern Bloc. So of course, it makes complete sense that this Syrian intellectual, this writer, this playwright, should end up in East Berlin in 1968 at a celebration of Brecht, where he encounters all kinds of other sorts of political playwrights. So this is a bit more for a general audience, and we hope, and I should reiterate, the only reason that it really came into being is that Martin Carlson from CUNY and Frank Hinchker were incredibly generous in letting us do a couple of new translations, and also really being incredibly supportive of our work. So what we're going to do now is to let you see a few scenes from a couple of the plays that we have translated. We're going to start with Baghdadi Bath. This is the opening of the play. It's about two brothers in a so-called Turkish bath, or a bath, a hammam, in Baghdad post-invasion. And Samar and Noor are going to read it for us. Thank you. Do you think we could move the accusative and nominative, or would that be possible? Thanks.
Filthy son of a bitch!
Who are you cursing?
Come, see for yourself the filth in the bottom of this tub.
Did you forget that the customers of this bath are the lowest of the low?
How do you explain the presence of this knife here, huh?
That's normal.
The tub reeks of putrid blood. You think that's normal?
Clean the tub and shut up.
What about this gold tooth in the bottom of the tub?
Oh.
It looks like real gold. Would it fit on one of your teeth?
Animal, stupid moron.
Put it in your mouth.
Let me check if it's really gold.
I'll give it to the owner of the bath.
Give it to me.
What are you going to do with it?
I'll sell it, of course.
What if it turns out to be fake?
I'll give it to one of my mistresses.
Bits of wood, tin foil. I found it here. In piss.
How this bath reminds me of my childhood. When my father used to drag me like a puppy to this very bath in this very tub. He'd scrub my body with pumice. He'd massage me on this table and lather my head and body. Look, I brought the same loofah and stone which father used. Here, sniff your father's smell, you moron. Sniff, come. I'll scrape your body as father scrapes mine until all of your filth goes down the drain. Whenever you need, I'll peel an orange for you with these two hands of mine. Here, smell the loofah.
Why is the bath empty?
Fear. People are afraid of surprises. That's why they return to their homes before sunset.
And why shouldn't we return to our homes as well?
Because we're not afraid.
No, I am afraid.
You shouldn't be as long as I'm with you. It's your turn now. Pour hot water on my back.
As you wish.
Lather my head.
I am your faithful servant.
Hamid, sing to me. I love to listen to your voice, especially in the baths. When I was in elementary school, my music teacher predicted that I'd be a singer.
Your voice is excellent. Superb.
If I'd followed my teacher's advice, I'd have become a famous singer by now. Just like Saad al-Hilli and Saadun al-Jabir and Nadim al-Ghalil. But my misfortune led me to drive buses. Oh, how I hate that filthy profession. All I gained from it was cursing and drinking and hashish. When I look at myself in the mirror, I don't even recognize my own strange features. I always scream, "Good morning, Majid." Fuck your face. Your filthy misfortune. My attitude changed. I've turned rougher with those who ride in my bus. I smoke hashish in the open. I go hunting for prostitutes. I have them sit next to me on the long rides outside of Baghdad. I keep kissing them no matter how disgusting their mouths smell. I've gotten used to not staying with any of them. I discard them as I discard my shoes at the door of a room. I have sex with them as an animal does, without any pleasure. I can't tell one from the other. Their names get all jumbled up in my head during sex. When I'm coming, I call out, Amina, Fahima, Fadila, Salima. God punished me by making me marry the 2 women I did. One lost her femininity. She's developed a deep voice and grown a mustache.
And the other?
With God's help, she turned into a cow. As I'm leaving the house, she appears from behind the door. But what's worse is God gave me 3 hunchback daughters. The most I can hope for is they'll marry the local gravedigger and I'll be done with them. That's why I started running away from the house. At night, I sneak out to the nearest bar and keep drinking and smoking hashish until I turn into a worn-out rag. And then I'd succumb to the first luscious woman I'd see, and I'd dance with her, babbling in English, of which I only know, wow, no, yes. Where's your inhaler? Did you lose it, Hamoud? What does thank you mean?
It means, fuck you.
Oh.
When are the elections?
What?
The elections.
What made you think about the elections?
I was wondering if you were going to vote.
Walk. I'm going to stick my finger in the election ink and vote for the first time. It'll be a chance for me to hug my allies, the Americans.
Hug Americans?
You don't see the good they've brought to this country.
When I look at one of them in the street, I want to puke.
There's plenty that's positive about them.
I know why you're defending them. Because they keep your buses and trucks in business. You fill your pockets with their dollars.
I swear by God Almighty, if they asked for my life, I'd give it to them as a token of my love and gratitude. My body trembles when I see their president on television. I get goosebumps, and I have an urge to pee when I look at his beautiful smile and the dance of his eyebrows and the way he moves his mouth. It stirs my blood. To me, he is the most charismatic president. Look at me, my body's trembling.
Look at your face. You look like an ox. My brother has turned into an ox.
Enough, son of a bitch. Have you no shame?
Oh, you scared me, Majid. I was joking. Do you remember when you used to yell in my face when we were in school? You'd scare me as you're doing now. Do you remember when you frightened me and made me piss in my pants? Speaking of school days, you didn't ask about my children. They need school supplies. They're starving, and my financial situation is sub-zero, while you live in another world. You can't even tell them apart. You don't know which one's Majid and which one's Kazim, who's Majira and who's Sajira.
I know them and I love them.
A powerful explosion. Majid goes out to the reception area of the bath. Hamid is scared and covers his head. After a moment, Majid returns. He's frightened.
We have to get back home right away. The owner says the police found 4 headless bodies in front of the woman's bath next door.
I'm not leaving. They'll cut our throats. Let's wait.
Shh! Don't raise your voice.
Another explosion. Nearer. A long silence.
What's the matter with you?
The dream came true.
What dream?
I saw her father's head cut off and thrown into the tub.
You dreamt of him because you're overwhelmed with guilt.
Why would I feel guilty?
Because you haven't visited his grave since he died. You didn't ask for his soul to be blessed. Do something for him. Slaughter a sheep and distribute it to the poor. Sprinkle water on his grave and read the Fatiha.
What makes me sad is that father lived poor and died without friends. Nobody walked in his funeral procession.
Why are you dismayed with others when you didn't walk in it yourself? Do you know how many people did? Me and my children.
Where was I then?
Ask yourself. Probably drunk in one of the houses of your whores.
Son of a bitch.
I'm not that son of a bitch.
If you say one more word, I'll cut your tongue out with this shoe. Understand?
Why did I ever come with you to this bath? Who knows if some thief or criminal will attack us or kill us, or the occupying soldiers will barge in here to wash their police dogs in these tubs, and then afterwards we'll have to wash ourselves with their piss.
I'm happy with them, happy with their dogs, and happy with their dogs' piss.
When you talk that way, you disgust me.
Don't insult me, you son of a bitch.
You really disgust me.
Look at me.
I accept your insult.
Of course you do. You're an insult addict.
I'm not going to say anything because you're my older brother.
Go ahead, speak. You want to insult me because I said I loved them. It's due to them that I walk the streets with my head held high. I can talk about anything I want. Without you.
Where is your conscience?
I threw my conscience in the toilet, okay?
I know.
You're too low to know.
After 16 years of working with you, I know you like you were naked.
How dare you talk to me about nakedness, you son of a bitch. I'll bust your head with this shoe. Where are you going?
Who used to smuggle merchandise? Who smuggled passports? You were a thief under the old regime, and you were a thief under this
Don't
one.
run away, come back.
You talk for a minute, and then you hit me with that shoe. Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, ask.
About your mother?
What about her?
She carried you in her womb for 9 months and another 50 years on her head. Did you ever help to carry her? When your mother got sick and fell down, did you ask her what was the matter? When you came back from Amman or Damascus with tons of flour and provisions, did you even feed her? To your children and your wives, you give everything, while your mother, who was lying on her deathbed, had to go to sleep hungry. You spend everything on your children without thinking, and cheat the brother you've been working with for 16 years out of the fruits of his labor. The need to feed my children turned me into your meek servant, but I didn't object for fear of losing my livelihood. Admit it. You're the cruelest, most brutal of brothers. You're a lovable thief who steals my strength away with brotherly affection. Don't you ever ask yourself why I'm disturbed? The sudden crying, the fits of hysteria? Forgive me, but I'm going to let everything inside of me out. It will help me if I tell you that you're a person devoid of any conscience, any mercy. You've used me in a vile way for 16 years. Especially when you used to fill up the bus with smuggled goods and ask me to deliver them to that merchant in Damascus, and I had no idea what they were. How would you have felt if I'd been caught on the Syrian-Iraqi border and thrown in prison? Would it have broken your heart if I'd been put to death for smuggling? Who would have protected my children who already live in a tiny house with no school, no security, and barely enough to eat? Is this justice? Is this brotherly love? You fell in love with the soldiers. You put all your buses at their service, and you fired me. You hired another driver without giving me 1 dinar in compensation. You threw me out.
Because you refused to work with them.
I was ashamed to work for them.
I, on the other hand, would deal with the devil to earn my livelihood.
But you have become their pet dog.
My master is my profession.
They occupy your country, and you consider them the noblest of God's creatures.
With their help, I buried my poverty.
While poverty has buried me and my children.
That's because you're irresponsible.
Why did you steal what was mine?
What about what's mine? All right, so you tell me. What happened to your conscience, your sense of justice and brotherliness in 1998 when I put you in charge of the bus and I told you, keep accurate accounts?
You'll find no one more upright than me.
You weren't upright with me, you manipulated the accounts.
Are you accusing me of stealing?
Yes, I am.
I would steal from my brother, the son of my mother?
Then where did all the proceeds of a full year go?
Is this what all my toil and devotion comes to?
Okay, then tell me the truth.
You used to beat me and scream at me. You didn't believe a word I said.
Are you scared to confess that you're a thief?
Apologize. Right now.
You're a professional thief and a lowlife.
Say you're sorry or I'll hang myself.
Hang yourself. Even if you do, you'll still have to tell me the truth.
I confess. Remember January of 98?
I remember.
When I came to your house and asked you to give me the bus?
I remember.
You gave me the bus?
I remember.
I told you about the deal I had with someone high up in the police to operate the bus. The stipulation was that we transport convicted soldiers from one prison to another. We agreed he would pay me 2 million dinars after the end of the shift, as he called it. At the same time, he made me sign another piece of paper in my own writing, that I would keep everything I saw or heard to myself. Otherwise, I'd be killed.
And you accepted?
Of course I did. But after I signed, I got frightened. I felt I'd made a big mistake. He told me what time the soldiers were to be moved, sunrise. I arrived the next day in front of the Radvaniya prison. At exactly 5:30, the police began to drag out convicted felons between 20 and 30 years old to humiliate them. They threw them into the bus blindfolded and nearly naked. They gave the signal for me to move. There was one military vehicle in front of the bus and another behind it. After driving for an hour on streets and alleys I didn't know, I saw a huge group of soldiers. They made the prisoners get out, stand in random order, and then suddenly they started shooting. The prisoners fell without saying a word. The air was engulfed in a horrible silence. I was overwhelmed with fear, with filth. I felt like I was their partner in crime. The world turned dark. They didn't even bother to bury these men where they'd murdered them. They wanted to desecrate them even further, so they carried them with blood dripping from their bodies into the bus. They ordered me to drive to somewhere else I didn't recognize. I wanted to puke. The bus reeked of blood. They ceremoniously and joyfully carried the corpses out of the bus and threw them into a ditch, with no mercy or compassion. More than a dozen gravediggers stood around that ditch, and 10 minutes later, the corpses all disappeared. The officer in charge came to me and ordered me to clean the bus and wipe away all traces of blood. They sat a few feet away from me. One of the soldiers pulled a bottle of arak out of his jacket and gulped at it. Others smoked and told jokes and laughed out loud. It was the worst moment of my life. They returned to the bus as if they hadn't committed a crime. On the contrary, they seemed even happier. They played cards and sang. The officer in charge told me I shouldn't find what happened strange at all. They were in a struggle against traitors to the nation. He insisted that I stay close to them and help them in their mission. He said they were going to keep me in prison for a few days until the operation was over, which meant they were putting me in solitary confinement. The next day at dawn, they repeated the same operation. They filled the bus with 40 young men, all sentenced to death. On the third day, there were more, 70 condemned men. They even asked me to put the corpses in bags, to carry the bodies up to the bus on my shoulders, to smoke with them, play cards, to tell them dirty jokes. They forced me to get drunk. They wanted to humiliate me. They put a machine gun in my hand and screamed, "Shoot, you son of a, shoot hard, shoot up in the air!" They turned me into a mop they used to clean up their crimes. I got sick, I puked blood, I lost my appetite, I turned pale and thin, I beat my head against the prison walls, I fell to the floor, I cried. They took me to a military hospital for treatment. After a month, the same officer came to see me. He threatened to cut my tongue out if I said a word about what I'd seen. "We've decided to accept your service with us as a gift," he said. "A most valuable contribution to the nation. We're not going to give you 1 dinar.
Forget the past. We must take advantage of the present situation to make up for our losses. We'll turn over a new leaf for the sake of our families. Don't despair. I will provide you with an excellent opportunity that will make you forget all my past mistakes. Come on. Give me a chance. Don't refuse to work with me this time. If you do, we'll both lose big because the catch is precious. We have to leave Baghdad tomorrow at dawn. The man we're going to bring from Amman to Baghdad is rich. He has more money than all the Arab governments combined. He's one of the most important candidates up for election in the next round.
All right, I'll do it.
I knew I could count on you.
But I'll be the driver this time. And I'll drive in my own crazy way.
Thank you so much. Very much an autobiographical play. One of the horrible ironies is that one of Jawad's brothers was a bus driver, was killed subsequent to the writing of the play. He said frequently bus drivers would have both Sunni and Shia identification, and his brother and son gave the wrong identification or whatever, and were shot and killed. So he very much, he also started out as in favor of the invasion of Iraq, which shocked me. I, quite disagreed with him. He went to Baghdad to do another play, and he came back, and the scene that you just saw comes from his realization that that was a grievous error on his part. The next scene that we're going to see is from Rituals, Signs and Transformation. It's Wannous' most famous play. It's very much his, it draws on a range of things, including Sufism and also Shakespeare's Measure for Measure and a historic event. it's a long, elaborate plot, but the short version is we're going to see a scene late in the play. Raya is going to play Mumina Almasa, excuse me. She has begun the play married to a cleric who is found in public lovemaking with a prostitute and is humiliated going through town. And Samir here is going to play the Mufti, his arch rival, who decides that he's going to save him from this humiliation and therefore gain control over him. And the way he's going to do it is substitute the cleric's wife for the prostitute he's found with. And then he goes to her with the plan, and little by little it becomes clear that he's becoming very attracted to her. She demands as payment for going along with the scheme that she be given a divorce from her husband, which is sort of shocking to him, but maybe good news. And so she leaves, and she becomes a celebrity in Damascus and a well-known courtesan, a prostitute. And it causes a giant disruption in society. In the scene that you're going to see, the Mufti has brought her together with her father, and the father has just told her, "Oh, how can you have done this? I'm appalled. You've become a prostitute," whatever. And she says, "Well, by the way, you are always, fooling with the young women in the house and everything," and they split up, and he spits on the floor, leaves. And then what happens is the Mufti comes in and says, "You've made your father angry." And he also unburdens his heart to her. Okay?
You've made your father angry?
We couldn't avoid anger. Why did you arrange this meeting?
Because your father wanted it, and because we're all shocked and dismayed. How could you fall so low? You astonish me.
Why are you astonished? Didn't you know?
Don't hold me responsible for this atrocious act.
I'm not holding you responsible for anything. But I believe I explained to you at length about the seduction of the abyss.
You said words I didn't understand very well, and I don't understand you now. I don't understand you, woman, how you think or why you act as you do.
There's no need to tire yourself trying.
But I need to understand you. You're... I don't know. If my scheme created this fate for you, I'm ready to correct it. I don't want my conscience to be burdened of sin.
And how do you propose to fix it?
I'm asking you to marry me.
Marry a whore. Sheikh Qasim.
Don't be so hard on yourself. You're of noble origin, and what happened was a mistake we can overlook.
This is a generous offer, which I don't think I deserve.
You are most deserving of it. I'll forget everything and make you the most cherished of my wives.
You'll do all this to clear your conscience.
Rather to... Well, why not? I want to have a clear conscience.
Don't burden it with sin. I was waiting for an opportunity to follow my desires. What I'm doing is what I choose to.
Regardless, I still want you to marry me.
I didn't divorce my husband so I could marry his double.
Are you refusing my offer?
My position doesn't allow me to deserve or accept it.
What are you, woman? What do you want? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for something a man with a tranquil soul such as yours can't understand.
Who said I have a tranquil soul?
Didn't you say you had a clear inner self and nothing to hide or be ashamed of?
Maybe I did. I no longer have a peaceful soul. Tell me, what do you want? What are you looking for?
This will sound vague. It's difficult to explain. As I sway on the edge and the abyss calls me, I imagine that at the moment I fall, colored feathers will grow out of my pores. Feathers will sprout from the roots of my soul, blossoming into perfection. I'll fly like a bird. Like the breeze and the rays of the sun, I want to cut these harsh ropes digging into my flesh and suppressing my body. Ropes woven out of horror, modesty and chastity, feeling of being sullied and filthy out of evocations of the Almighty, warnings, parables, and the counsels of the ancestors, slab upon slab, under which the body withers and fades away. I want to liberate my body, Sheikh Qasim, to untie these ropes that suck the life out of it and repress it. I want it to be free and return to the orbit for which I was born, like roses and leaves, like the moon and grass, like gazelles and springs trickling down slopes, like the light and all that is living in this universe. I dream of reaching my inner self and becoming as clear as glass, having the eye see my inner being. My heart burns with passion and fervent desires. I have difficulty finding words fit to explain it.
Your situation is strange, Mu'mina.
I told you, my name is Almaza, and I'm very keen on protecting my name.
Your situation is strange, woman. What you say is unfathomable to any reasonable person. What do you mean? Are you trying to dress up immorality? Do you think you'll find in prostitution what you're searching for? What a strange and deviant notion. Tell me it's no more than a whim.
A whim? One doesn't overturn one's fate on a whim. According to your norms, what I'm doing must seem deviant and strange.
It's not just my norms, it's everyone's.
You're right. And the first station on my journey is to put your norms behind me. I must free myself from your judgments, labels, and admonitions. In order to attain my true self, I must overcome the danger of being violated in order to become acquainted with my body. You made me and all women into defective, vulnerable beings susceptible to violation by a word, a look, a glance. You made it your business to incessantly abuse this imperfection until we all turned into reptiles, tearing at one another in a swamp of shackles, appearances, and lies. I have decided to leave this fetid swamp, Sheikh Qasim, and become a sea that can't be polluted. I'll rid myself of defectiveness. I'll exist beyond the limits of fear and violation. I doubt you'll understand me, though it's no longer important if anyone understands me.
You make me dizzy, Almasa. Your determination, the tone of your voice, give me shivers. You grasp at sin with a recklessness no woman in the city has ever matched. I know there are violent desires in you, but can I really let you continue along this path? A woman with your determination and power can corrupt a sultanate of women. You're undoing our lives, our system, our future. No, I can't allow it.
What are you going to do about it?
A religious decree is a powerful weapon.
Are you declaring war?
It's a war I neither want nor desire. Listen, there isn't a single person who in solitude doesn't have desires or passions. Who among us in a heedless moment doesn't hear the temptations of Satan?
Are you admitting you have desires and temptations?
Yes, but I control and suppress them. I care about you, and despite these admissions, I still want you.
You'll make me think I'm one of your temptations.
I don't know if it's a temptation or madness. From the moment I met you, your image has been following me. You've troubled my spirit and perturbed my heart. I don't know what to say. Please, be reasonable and accept my offer.
Is it love or mufti?
I don't know what it is. Don't ask me. Do you accept my proposal of marriage or not?
Our paths are different, and my desires can't be satisfied by marriage.
Don't answer too quickly, I beg you. Take your time and think it over. I want you.
This confession would make any woman proud. But what can I do? I already told my father. My fate has been decided. I can't hide from it or deny it.
If that's the case, it's you who has declared the war.
If war breaks out, it too will be part of my fate. When one goes beyond the edge and swims in the vast sky, it's impossible to go back. It's goodbye for now, Mufti.
There's nothing beyond the edge but the abyss.
That possibility has never left my mind.
Lord, what kind of woman is this? Where am I sliding toward? How do I calm this agitation in my soul? Lord, I'm possessed. I'm in love. There's no happiness left in this heart. Only temptation and sorrow.
The next scene, which will be read by Layla Buck, one of my friends and former students, seems unbelievable, who's gone on to have a real extraordinary career of her own. This is from the final play in the Brill book on modern and contemporary political theater from the Levant. The play takes its title from a famous Egyptian song, Where Would I Find Someone Like You, Ali? And the play is a monologue of one woman played by Ra'ida Taha, who it's very much autobiographical. She is the daughter of a famous Fedayeen who was killed in an operation at the Lodz airport, which later became Ben Gurion Airport in Israel in 1972. And this play is from the mid-teen, like 2015, 16. It was done in conjunction with Lena Abiad, who is a wonderful director who's at LIU. And it is a very different view of these heroic figures. They're seen in the Arab world as heroic figures, the freedom fighters. The children of the dead freedom fighters were themselves treated as heroes, special children, and Ra'ida was taken under the wing of Yasser Arafat, actually became his press secretary, went around the world with him. And so she draws on elements of the Hakawati tradition, the Arab storytelling tradition, and the one-person play in the West. She lived in the United States for a while in the construction of this autobiographical play. And within it, she plays a number of characters in her own family. In the one that we're going to see here, she plays her aunt, who's insistent on getting the body of her brother, Ra'ida's father, back from the Israelis, and goes to Henry Kissinger to insist that she wants the body back. The translation was done by Ismail Khalidi, whom I'm sure a number of you know, who is a very well-known playwright, who has a recent book of translations with Naomi Wallace. So this one, I would say probably we did less with it in terms of editing, but we did very much try and find, again, a voice in which the audience will respond to this character as if the play were in English, is what we were seeking. So it's wonderful to have someone like Layla read it, who very much understands both languages, both worlds, or whatever. Layla.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you so much for this. I just also want to say that I did forgive me, I did a little tiny bit of editing and tweaking just to be able to share some of the story in a flow for the excerpt. So this is The Corpse and Kissinger from Where Would I Find Someone Like You, Ali by Ra'ida. I remember when my father would play with us. We'd climb on his back in turn. He'd sing and we'd sing back, "My little lambs," and we'd reply, "Ba, ba," and we'd all collapse laughing. One time he bought my mother a nightgown. I nearly died of jealousy and said to him, "I want one exactly like it, the same beautiful red." And when they'd go off to spend the evening somewhere, I'd stay up waiting for them on the balcony, frightened, while my other sisters slept on. When I heard their laughing voices, I'd run off to my bed before they'd see me. Ali would sometimes say, "A little bird told me that you were naughty and didn't listen to Mom and drink your milk." I didn't believe him. Little birds don't speak. So he recorded the voice of a little bird speaking, and when my sisters and I heard it, we went wild. At night, I'd hear loud voices, men with harsh voices talking and talking. I'd become frightened and call out for my mom and ask her, "Why is Ali angry? I am afraid for him." And she'd reply, "No, my dear, it's just talk. This is how the Palestinians speak and discuss matters. It was the first time I heard that word. After my father was martyred, back home in Silwan, my aunt brought out her collection of news clippings. My aunt is illiterate, but you wouldn't know it, since she's memorized the contents of every clipping. This one is about the time I saw Kurt Waldheim. This one, when I sent a letter to Golda Meir. This one, when I went to the Red Cross, damned liars, to ask about your father. Let me see. Yes. This is when all the newspapers wrote about me and the American Secretary of State. As I grew older, she'd tell me the details. When I told her I was doing a play about my father, she said, "Have no fear, Habibti. I know your dad's story better than I know my own name." She made me a glass of tea with sage and began. "Ever since the day your father left us, there was a fire in my heart which never went out, a fire that waved its flames back and forth at me like so. When I learned that your dad was in a refrigerator, I vowed to myself not to cover myself with a blanket either summer or winter until I'd removed him from where he was and buried him properly. Early one morning, as I was kneading dough, there was a news flash on the radio. I jumped up, washed my hands, dressed, and ran outside. I said to Dawlat, 'Give your father-in-law his breakfast and tell him I'm off to see someone.' I stopped a taxi and told the driver, 'Take me to Jaffa Street, to the office of Felicia Langer. Do you know her?' 'Oh yes,' he replied. 'She's that lawyer who defends Arabs.' It was Felicia who managed to get your Aunt Abla released from prison. It was your father who had recruited Abla into the Arab nationalist movement. The day the operation took place, I suspected your Aunt Abla might be with them, but it turned out to be only your father at that time. Anyway, in the taxi, I'd look out of the window and see their excavations along the road. Everywhere you looked. And I'd say to myself, God damn them, they've been digging from the moment they arrived. We go to sleep and it's one thing, and we wake up and it's something else. One time it's a temple, another it's some ruins. Forgive me for saying so, but even the pissoir in the Christian neighborhood was turned into Jewish ruins. Damn them and their digging. I arrived at Jaffa Street and said to myself, Jaffa Street, my foot. There's not a single person from Jaffa here. They're all Jews from God knows where. I found Felicia's office and said to her, Felicia, Kissinger is here and I want to talk to him. Felicia said, go, my dear, and if you don't get to see him, we will go to La Haye. So I told her, yes, of course I'll go. Did you know that La Haye was The Hague? I asked my aunt. La Haye, ma Haye, she replied. It's enough your dad was sitting in the cold and the dark. So I said goodbye to Felicia and continued on to the offices of Saab newspaper. There was a young fellow there called Ahmed who used to help me write letters in Arabic and English. So I said to him, I want a letter in English, which I want to hand to Kissinger, and another in Arabic, which you will print in your newspaper as a story. I'm off now to see him. Then I went down to the street and stopped another taxi. The sun was beating down on my head, and I told him to take me to the American consulate, where I found a vast number of people standing in line. So I stood in line until my turn came. I was drenched with sweat. I now found myself facing a woman in a glass booth. Hello, sister, I said, peace be with you. Is Kissinger here? She started laughing, the little twerp. No, my dear, Kissinger is in Manila. Next! I swear to you, Habibti, I didn't know what Manila was. So I said to myself, better go to Bab al-Ammud and ask around. Do you know where Bab al-Ammud is, Habibti? Yes, I replied, it's the gate that leads to Al-Aqsa Mosque near Grandpa Jamil's house in the old city. At that moment, I glimpsed my brother Tahir's car, that's your uncle, and hear him shouting, Suhaila, what are you doing here alone without your husband and children? I couldn't believe my luck. Please take me to Manila. And by the way, what's Manila? He frowned. Good God, you want to go there and you don't know what that is? Manila is a 5-star hotel in Jewish Jerusalem. Kissinger is there and I want to see him. What do you want to see him for? He shouted. What, you're afraid I'd kill him? I just want to deliver a letter. Look, just drive me there, please. And all the way there, Habibti, he keeps saying, I swear they'll give you the body and take us in his place. Here's the hotel. I can't park here, it's forbidden. Suhaila, what you're about to do is men's work. Men's work. Imagine. So I said, and where are the men, Tahir? Huh? I don't see any men here. And I slammed the car door in his silly face. You know, Habibti, I felt so humiliated, so tired of them and their excuses. Every time I'd say to your uncles, where is your brother? Why don't you ask about him? They'd say, oh, it's settled. Tomorrow they'll give him to you. And I'd say, who will give him to you? Habibti, the Israelis are one breed and your uncles are another. So I tidied my hair, wrapped my scarf around, shook out my dress, and entered the hotel. The security guard frisked me, and would you believe it? Right at the entrance, by some stroke of luck, I found one of your dad's friends, Sabra, from the days when they were tour guides together in Jerusalem. I said to him, peace be upon you, do you still remember me? I'm Muhammad, sister of Ali Taha. He came out from behind his desk and began laughing. Oh, Muhammad, can it be? What are you doing here? Those were the days, no? With the tourist groups and the old city. You know, Ali would say to me, you take the Brits and I'll take the Germans. I can't stand the Brits. They are the cause of all our misfortunes. What a loss, your brother. What can I do for you, Muhammad? Kissinger is here and I want to see him. Wow, just like that. Kissinger, huh? That should be a breeze. I want to see him in person. I want my brother Ali and a letter won't do. Muhammad, you're in luck. Here, as we speak, is the American attaché, and the other one with him is the military attaché. And he goes chasing after them and says, sir, and he babbles in English to him. The man keeps shouting at Sabra, and he comes back. Kissinger doesn't meet with Arabs, Sabra tells me. What? And you should have seen me, my dear, charging at the American. And before I'd even finished my request, the American starts shouting at me too. Who are you? What are you doing here? If you have a letter, give it to me and go. Go! It turned out the fellow could speak Arabic. They're all spies, I tell you. Listen, I said, I will not hand the letter to anyone except him, in person. Do you know Ali Taha? I swear he knew him. Ali is my brother. A gentle person with a permanent smile on his face. Come, Sabra, and translate. He hijacked a plane to Lidda airport, but his motive was humanitarian. He only wanted the Israelis to free prisoners who were rotting away in their prisons, 100 of them, all of them his friends, some of them sick too, and they killed him for that. Barak and Netanyahu killed him, God damn them. They tricked him, and he fell for their trick, being a decent human being. The moment I say all this, they go wild and start repeating like parrots. All meetings are strictly forbidden. All meetings are strictly forbidden. So I say, listen you, Sabra translate. I am a mother of 9 girls and boys. I brought them all to Jerusalem. And this time has come for justice. I am ready to spend the rest of my life either in prison or in the empty grave I've dug for Ali. You choose. They walked away, repeating the phrase, all meetings are strictly forbidden. Then they went up the stairs. And I, my dear, followed stealthily behind. And what about Sabra? What did he do? Oh, he pretended to ignore it all, bless him. He's your dad's friend and can recognize a just cause when he sees it. But he can also recognize when to keep a low profile. The Americans went into a room. I followed them and knocked on the door. A young woman opened it. When I said, peace be upon you, is Kissinger here? She shouted, no, 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 and shook her head. Suddenly, a man comes out from another room, and I recognize him. So I shout at the top of my lungs, hey you, Kissinger! Hey, come here, Kissinger! He comes over and stands between me and the young woman. His eyes are about to pop. Blue. I remember they were very blue. I tell him, listen, my brother is a martyr, and they've had him in a refrigerator for the past 2 years. Every human being has the right to bury and be buried. I wrote you 2 letters and you didn't respond, Kissinger. Here's my 3rd. Take it. This is inhuman. I only want my brother. Kissinger patted my shoulder. Okay, he said. Okay. Did you really speak like that to Kissinger? I asked. My dear, if you have right on your side, you fear nothing. I returned to Silwan, tired and aching, and went straight to sleep. The next thing I know, there's a knock on the door. I rise and open it and find my brother Tawfiq, one eye open, the other closed and barely visible through the smoke of the cigarette dangling from his mouth. They sent you a telegram to my shop in the old city. He paused. And they want to give you a Ali. Kissinger asks that you go with the lawyer and the files to Beit El, the headquarters of the military governor, to receive the body. I didn't sleep a wink that night, waiting for the dawn call to pray. As soon as it was over, we took off to the civil administration in Ramallah. "Hello, Suhaila," said an Israeli army officer named Maryam. "All the arrangements are ready. Come back Sunday, but you need to coordinate with Sheikh Jabari in Hebron, where your brother will be buried, and not in Jerusalem. No saboteur can be buried here in Jerusalem, where people can come and visit the grave. This meeting is now over." Lord, I thought, even as a dead man, they're scared of you, brother. The bastards won't even let your body rest in Jerusalem. Thanks to my Aunt Suhaila, we buried my father in Hebron. To this day, for 42 years, my Aunt Suhaila has a picture of Ali hanging around her neck. And to this day, she will not eat anything frozen.
Thank you all. We're happy to answer any questions you have. We did bring film clips of a couple of productions from Beirut, but I don't think that we can really we shouldn't even try to compete with the live energy of what's here. If somebody would like to see them at some point, one of the things that we were thinking of showing is a joint AAB-LAU production, because we've actually, this artistic marriage we have is an institutional marriage between me and Nada, in that it's brought the universities together in a way that they have heretofore, they've sort of seen each other as competitors. And I think the fact that we've done this work together, and the clip I was thinking of showing you, The Rape, is it's a tough play, as you can imagine, and but it is an extraordinary example, I think probably the best, of how the synergy of the institutions of us coming together. So we're happy to share that or any of our other work with you, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. If not, you've been a wonderful audience, and it's so nice to look out and see all these friends and people I'd like to be friends with. So thanks for coming.
Are they online?
They're not. There may be pieces of them online, but if you're interested in seeing portions of them, we can arrange it. So I know some of you are scholars or theatrical artists or whatever. If you'd like to see them, we will be more than happy to, share them with you. Okay? But this has been wonderful, and thanks. You launched the book, so thank you.